Welcome to Presidential Fight Club, the show that answers the question, if all 44 presidents fought each other one-on-one, who would win? Hosted by two history professors who have too much time on their hands, Scott Rank and James Early. Welcome to the final fight of round 2 of the Midwestern Regional. Two contenders are James Garfield and Rutherford B. Hayes. This is going to be an interesting fight because these two are very evenly matched for a lot of different reasons. And James, tell us about Garfield and what he brings to the fight and how him and Hayes have a lot in common.
Well, let me start by saying that Garfield was one of the most intelligent presidents we've ever had. He was brilliant. He was largely self-educated. He did get some formal education later. And he ends up teaching in a school. He could multitask. He was ambidextrous. That could also help in fighting, by the way. If you asked him a question, he could write the answer down in Greek with one hand and Latin with the other simultaneously. And he taught almost every subject you can think of. He taught math. He taught Latin, Greek, languages, science even. And one thing that I learned a long time ago when I used to teach math, he actually designed an original proof for the Pythagorean theorem. So very, very smart fighter. He brings a lot of intelligence to the table, but of course we're not having a math battle here or anything like that. We're not having this is not the quiz bowl or anything. But he was also physically very, very tough. He grew up poor and fatherless in Ohio. He was the last president born in a log cabin. So that's kind of interesting. Unless, of course, if they come back into style later, maybe we'll have another one. But I don't see that happening. His schoolmates relentlessly mocked him for his fatherless status because it was considered to be kind of, not a scandal, but you were looked down on if you were an orphan, if you didn't have a dad. So people were always picking on him, and he grew up having to fight off people, bullies and everything. So he became a pretty scrappy fighter from a very young age. He earned himself the nickname the Fighting Kid. He was also an accomplished wrestler like Lincoln, maybe not quite as good as Lincoln, but he was really, really good. And he taught school, as I mentioned before. And back in those days, the kids were really, really tough sometimes in school. They would just refuse to obey. And so the teacher had to be tough. And there was a situation where one student refused to obey him, and Garfield reportedly, quote, flogged him severely, unquote. And then the fellow attacked him with a plank of wood for what Garfield described as a merry time. So, here's a guy that thinks fighting with wood planks is merry. Lots of fun. I just do it for fun. He also, he liked as a hobby for a workout. He was one of the few presidents prior to the 20th century that actually worked out just to keep in shape. And he juggled Indian clubs. And that may sound, kind of, okay, what's an Indian club? Who knows what that is? They're large wooden bowling pin-shaped pieces of wood that weigh 50 pounds. I didn't know that until pretty recently. So he was lifting weights by juggling these big, heavy clubs. And then, of course, we have to mention the fact that Garfield served in the Civil War. He was very brave. He served with great distinction. He worked his way up to Major General. So Garfield pretty much brings it all. He brings both regular intelligence as well as great strength and fighting intelligence to the match. Oh, also let me mention too, he's 6 foot tall and he's about 180 pounds, so in very good shape.
Hayes and Garfield are interesting because a few times when I was looking at my notes, I thought, wait, do I have the right one or did I get them mixed up? Because they have a lot in common. Now, Garfield is taller. Hayes is 5'8", about 180 pounds when he's president. He's president right before Garfield. Hayes is president 1877 to 1881. Garfield, 1881 onward. Both were major generals in the Army during the Civil War. Hayes was in the 23rd Ohio Infantry. He commands future President William McKinley, which we mentioned during our McKinley analysis earlier. And Hayes is an interesting guy because he is president during the age of machine bosses and rampant corruption, where there's machine politics that can almost guarantee all electoral votes go to their favorite candidate when they owe him a favor or for whatever type of horse trading is going on behind the scenes. And Hayes is able to become president because he's one of the very few people who doesn't reek of corruption. So that's part of why party bosses choose him, because he doesn't reek of scandal. Now, in terms of what he would bring to a fight, when I saw his background, he reminded me a lot of Teddy Roosevelt. So Teddy from Another Daddy, or whatever you want to call it. He's like Teddy, he's a sickly child. His mother thought that he would die young. She removes herself from him, not wanting to get too attached, but he thinks that he can heal himself and strengthen himself by a tough fitness regimen. So he hunts, he runs. He is then later remarked upon as having an unusual strength and coordination as a child. He has a big bushy beard by the time he's president. He's not afraid to use innovative tactics. So he's the first president that has a telephone in the White House. He's there when Edison is inventing up a storm. So the seeing possibilities that might not be there could perhaps help him on the battlefield. He said about fighting battles is like courting girls. Those who make the most pretensions and boldest moves usually win. And we talked about both of these contenders serve in the Civil War. In terms of what Hayes did, there are a lot of stories that show his tenacity and not being afraid to keep going when he gets shot. At one point in one battle in 1862, he gets shot in the left arm, tears blood vessels. He's bleeding out on the ground, vomiting from the pain and the blood loss, continues to direct his troops and scatters the rebels. Then again, he's shot in 1864. He's knocked unconscious when a bullet grazes his skull. He comes to and rejoins the fight. And to show how strong he was and how high his pain tolerance was, in 1893, he was 71 years old, taking a train to Cleveland, noticed a brief pain in his chest. Only until 3 days later, when he dies at home, is it found in the autopsy that he actually had a heart attack, but he just keeps going along his day. So a guy who can weather a heart attack without too much difficulty is my man in a fight. But is it the man for those who vote? James, who is the winner?
According to the voters and American history fanatics, this was a very close fight. I mean, we're talking 14, 15 rounder. These two are so evenly matched, and they're both so tough, and they can take pain. And we didn't even talk about Garfield's surgery. We'll save that for the next one, because Garfield wins. And I think he wins. Dun, 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 dun. I think it's primarily just because of the height advantage. He would have a greater reach, longer arms, and all that. But other than that, it's really close. I think had Hayes been paired up with somebody else in his first fight, he would have advanced, but that's just the luck of the draw.
There it is. All right. Well, Garfield advances, Hayes does not. We're moving on to the semifinals, and our first contender is Abraham Lincoln, and he's going up against William Henry Harrison. Thanks for listening to Presidential Fight Club. If you'd like to download your own printable bracket sheets for each regional tournament so you can guess how the tournament will go, check out presidentialfightclub.com. We'd appreciate it if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts as well. Thanks for listening, and may you fight with the stamina of Teddy Roosevelt, the courage of George Washington, and the reach of Abraham Lincoln.